Okay, brilliant. So I just wanted to welcome you all to today's event and thank you all for joining us today for this Lunch and Learn service that's presented by children and families across borders. I'll be handing over to Ruth and Chloe shortly, but first of all, I just wanted to talk to you briefly about CFAB, the work that we do, and some of the services that we can provide. So CFAB is the UK branch of International Social Service, and through that network, we've got access to partners in over 130 countries around the world. Our team are experts in social work in an international context, cross-border child protection cases, care proceedings that require cross-border cooperation, and overseas placements. We provide guidance and practical support on cross-border children and family cases via our free advice line. It's open Monday to Friday from 10 till 3:30, and the number's available there on the screen. Please do call us if you have any questions. As well as our advice line, we also provide casework services. And you can see some of those on this slide here. The services that we provide include issuing child protection alerts, as well as completing record checks, welfare visits, and full assessments. We can also provide pre and post-placement support services, and we offer family reunification support and life story work. We also have a training programme, and this can provide you or your organisation with specialist content relating to international child protection, kinship care, and best interest assessments for unaccompanied children. You can go to our website to find out more information on our training courses. And I would ask that you take a moment after the session to visit our website, because here you'll find out more about how CFAB can support you and view all of our free resources that include fact sheets and guides that are available for you to download. You can also visit our Cultural Family Life Library, which contains introductory guides we've created for professionals on the history and culture of families of Romanian heritage and Jamaican heritage. And watch this space because we're working on new guides right at this moment. So thank you all for your time this afternoon. And I will now pass you over to Ruth and Chloe, who will discuss with you today's session, which is good practice when supporting refugee families in the UK. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to just start with some introductions so you know who we are. My name's Ruth. I've been working at CFAB for 2 years. I'm a registered social worker and have worked in local authority for 10 years, working in leaving care and looked after children and young people. I also have experience of living in the Middle East for 12 years. I'm an Arabic speaker, and I also have lived experience of working with refugees, as my partner is a refugee himself, so I've worked with lived experience of the refugee experience both abroad and in the UK. So I'm very happy to talk about this subject today. It's something I'm very passionate about. Let me introduce Chloe as well.
Hello everybody, my name is Chloe. I've been working at CFAB now for 3.5 years on the post-placement support project. I have over 20 years experience in the field of refugee, asylum seekers and migrant families and young people in various roles for varying NGOs. I'm also a Farsi speaker and have travelled and lived in the Middle East as well.
Thanks, Chloe. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is just an introduction initially to a little bit about what the post-placement support project is, and then we'll go on to talk about good practice working with refugees. So the CFAB post-placement support service provides support for children and young people who have recently arrived to the UK to join extended family. So let me give you an idea of the type of scenarios that could be. That could be an adult family member, a father, for example, who arrives in the UK on a small boat to claim asylum. Once he claims asylum on arrival, he then maybe gains his refugee status, and then once he's gained his refugee status, he can apply for a family reunification visa for his other family members to join him in the UK. Another scenario could be a young person who arrived to the UK as an unaccompanied minor. And as a young adult, that young person is able to successfully apply for his younger siblings or his mum or other family members to join him in the UK. Often these immigration applications are outside the rules, and there are particular circumstances that make these families vulnerable and need support when they arrive to the UK. Another scenario of a family we might support may be a family who has claiming asylum in the UK, and different family members have arrived at different times to the UK to claim asylum, and they are separated and living in different parts of the UK and need support to be reunited as a family in the same hotel or accommodation together. So these are all families that potentially need support when they arrive in the UK, and this is as a post-placement support service, the type of families we're trying to help. So the main areas of support that we offer are help to access health and wellbeing services. So this could be helping a family register with the GP, helping them book urgent health appointments, referrals for counselling, mental health support. We have life story projects in CFAB, maybe a referral for life story work. Also, another area of support we want to offer to the families is accessing education. So advising families about the importance of children attending school, in-year school applications, supporting young people to access ESOL provision, or for parents to access ESOL English lessons, and nursery education for children. Another area we can help with is access to housing, so rehousing applications, homelessness applications. And finally, another big area of support that these families may need help with is access to benefits, so advising about access to child benefit, assisting them with these applications, universal credit, housing benefit, or council tax. There's many more areas in addition to this, but this is some examples. Another aim of the project is to support families to stay together. So many of these families are very vulnerable, and without support, the children and young people are not going to thrive, and there may be potential safeguarding issues. I think for these families with early intervention, then hopefully these families will not need support from statutory services as children need, or children that are at risk. And hopefully we can deal with these issues and provide support for family issues around non-school attendance, poor mental health, overcrowded housing conditions, help the family improve their life skills and their resilience, which will improve outcomes for the family and for the young people, so that they do not need to access statutory services, hopefully. So slide 10, who are the families who are eligible for services from post-placement support projects? Unaccompanied minors may be eligible for services, supported children, separated children we work with, or recent migrants to the UK. It may be an asylum-seeking child who has arrived in the UK accompanied by a family member who's being reunited with relatives who are already living in this country. We work with young people ages 18 and under who are in need of help to access physical and psychological health services, education services, housing and benefits. In addition, we also work with young people up to the age of 21 where there's particular vulnerable circumstances or barriers for them to accessing services. For example, a young person with a disability, with a life limiting illness, or a young person, in those situations. We'll also at the moment started considering support to young people who are being age assessed, and there's an age dispute and the young person is presenting as under 18 but is maybe being treated as over 18, and for these young people there's limited access to support. So just to summarise, we will give priority to unaccompanied minors, young people who are unaccompanied minors. We'll also provide support to families throughout the UK. We recognise that there is families that maybe outside of London where there are less services for refugees, refugee families to access culturally appropriate services or services that understand the needs of refugee families who may find it harder to access support. We get referrals from law centres, from an organisation called Safe Passage, another organisation Together Now, who give us referrals. We all welcome referrals from any organisation that has a family they're working with where there's been an element of separation, the family is needing support. Also, we welcome self-referrals. So we have a number of families where word gets around in their community, and then they hear about the service and they're able to self-refer. So the range of families we work with from Iran, Syria, Yemen, Kuwaiti Badoon, Afghani, Sudanese, Eritrea, Cameroon, Benin, El Salvador, Palestine, Ukraine. So really a range of countries and nationalities that we're working with people from. So firstly, I want to talk about some of the challenges that these families are facing. Firstly, it's important to acknowledge that these families are resettling in the UK in the context of a hostile environment. What do I mean by a hostile environment? Some use the term hostile environment to describe all policies which make life difficult for immigrants living in the UK, treating them as less deserving of dignity and humanity than British citizens. And so this policy has the effect of making people who are providing services to someone from a different country, makes them gatekeepers of services. So firstly, they have to check the immigration status of that person before they're providing services to them. This applies in the health setting, in the housing services, in the benefits, in the bank, that people are having to act as gatekeepers. And then when you have scandals like the Windrush scandal and recent the Illegal Immigration Act of 2023, the Rwanda legislation means that refugees and asylum seekers are living in a climate of fear. And this increases the racial discrimination that people face. It means that people are not accessing services because of fears of what they might be entitled to, and in turn makes these families more vulnerable. So it's just important to acknowledge that this is the environment that we're providing services to people in, and to understand the barrier that this is for them. Another challenge is the social welfare context in the UK at the moment. Increasingly, public services are overstretched. For example, in the sphere of housing, many families are living in overcrowded conditions and poor living conditions. They're struggling to access their rights under homelessness legislation, getting turned away at the door of the council offices because they're being told they're not entitled to access housing when they are entitled. And then once they are in temporary accommodation, they have no access to cooking facilities. They may experience frequent moves. So many, the context of stretched public services means it's very challenging. For young people aged 16 and 17, maybe a long waiting list to get on an English course, which then has a knock-on effect in terms of their ability to claim family to claim child benefit for them or to claim universal credit. The other challenge for families is the trauma that they've suffered. Many are escaping civil war in their home country. They've had relatives who've lost their lives or been or disappeared. They'll have been dealing with displacement, often moving between different countries before their arrival to the UK, which will have impacted on the child's education, a stable home life, their access to healthcare over many years of their life prior to their arrival to the UK. For people who are stateless, for example, Kuwaiti Badoons, they'll have lived as stateless in their own birth countries and then maybe sought asylum in a third country and then been rejected, had their asylum claim rejected in a third country, and then travelled to the UK to have their asylum claim rejected. So just a constant state of moving from country to country to find a place of refuge. And often it's those families that are from lower social economic statuses that are most vulnerable. Many also have had difficult journeys. They'll have experienced trauma in their difficult journeys to the UK, sexual violence, physical violence, abuse at the hands of traffickers, traumatic journeys. Maybe we hear I've spoken to many families where there's been an experience of their boat capsizing or having been in the water for many hours on their journeys to the UK. And I think when we're working with these families, this trauma stays with these families well long after their arrival and getting their refugee status. And this flight, fight or freeze response that we know to trauma continues to be activated for a long time, and they're living in this state of heightened awareness long after settling in the UK. And so our role as trauma-informed practitioners is to be able to understand how these families are functioning and support them with their transition and refer them for support where appropriate. Another challenge facing families is just years of separation that the families have experienced. Within the wider family network, separation from wider family network, maybe their grandparents or cousins, but then also in the nuclear family, separations in the family from mum. Maybe dad has travelled and he's had to wait 4 or 5 years before his family then are able to join him. And they will have had different journeys in those intervening years. So dad will have had the experience of adjusting to life in the UK and all that means for him. And his family will have been living in a different country, having a totally different experience for him. For them to come together as a family again and bring together those different experiences is very challenging and presents challenges in the family dynamics and how they relate to one another. They'll also have had different experience in terms of families are coming from a group culture to an individualistic culture. Their families will have to adjust in terms of their parenting styles. There's changes in the resources that are available to the family, and they have to adapt to new ways of problem solving as a family. So these are all challenges a family faces as a result of separation and loss and grief, and also this context of moving across cultures. Another challenge is racism and unconscious bias families face. And I think the hostile environment policies that I mentioned earlier means it's just inbuilt racism into our system. So most refugees will tell you racism is just a common everyday experience of living in the UK. I've had refugees tell me when they approach housing, well, why did you bring your family here if you can't provide for them? That's just a common comment that is said, I've heard several times said to families, racism from neighbours, racial harassment in the street from neighbours, from looking different maybe if they're living in an area that's mainly white, being mocked for not being able to communicate well in English. I was visiting a family last week and the lady wears a niqab and she said, I feel terrified in the street because everybody looks at me and now I feel like I don't want to leave the house because everybody's looking at me for wearing the niqab. Another challenge for families is in terms of the bureaucracy they face. We know about the challenges refugees face in terms of language and literacy, and also digital literacy and lack of documentation. Setting up a bank account, registering with the GP, setting up a universal credit claim, huge long forms for families to fill in. That if you're from an oral culture, you'll have never filled long forms in, and you will not know how to do this. Even if you are literate, the concepts will be alien to you, and you won't know how to do this. And will need support with these things. They're huge barriers for families accessing services that we often underestimate. Another challenge is financial burdens the family is probably carrying. Many families, many refugees have probably borrowed money to make their way to the UK, to pay people smugglers, and also they have the financial burden of it. Maybe there's an expectation in their culture that they will be providing support to aging or sick family members who are still back at home in the country they've come from, or in living in civil war and no access to resources. There's also a struggle with the shock of the cost of living in the UK, how far money will stretch, and managing their expectations about the type of lifestyle they're going to have in the UK, what the prospects of employment are, getting used to paying taxes, and then also pressure from family members abroad to show that their sacrifice was worth it. We've all given for this family to make their way to the UK so that they can live a better life. So I need to show how good my life is here, so that they won't be disappointed with the sacrifices they've made. And these are huge sources of stress and anxiety that the families are facing. Another aspect is barrier is who do you trust? Many of those seeking asylum come from countries where there is low trust in institutions due to corruption or fear. Many are fleeing authoritarian regimes where the rule of law is not upheld. And it's important for us to understand how culture influences these issues. For example, in the Arab culture, there's a concept called wasta, which is how all official business is really done. And this is the concept that if I know someone in power, I give them my loyalty, that they in turn will use their influence to open doors for me. This is how people get jobs. This is how people get into university courses, and how much of the business of daily life is conducted. And it results in people having little trust of institutions, and they often feel powerless. So this can present as anxiety or over anxiety. For example, at the moment, I'm working with a family from Palestine, and this presents this over anxiety, this anxiety. I think wrong to say over anxiety. This anxiety presents itself by her contacting everybody in her social network who she thinks may have some wasta or influence to phone me or phone the social worker involved in her life, or any services to try and help her. So it just ends up getting very confusing and get quite paralyzing, and often paralyze the service. The other way this functions, that I have families who I know they're coming to me because they think I have some wasta, and I can use this concept in two ways. I can use that I know I have a voice in how this family, a lot of power in many ways, and I can use this to help the family overcome some of the hurdles that they're facing. And in the same way, their loyalty to me means that I can use my power to influence a better outcomes for the children, maybe some of the hurdles they're facing. But at the same time, they have the advantage of knowing I will advocate for them on their behalf to access services where there are barriers. I just want to briefly go through a case study. I'll just go through it really quickly because of time. Of a family, a typical case we work with. So family B, Bertie, is mum, dad, and 2 children. Dad arrives to the UK as an asylum seeker from another country. He arrives, claims asylum. When he arrives in the UK, he's living with his extended family in the UK. Decides he doesn't want to access the asylum support system and lives with extended family members. And then he's granted refugee status and submits an application for family reunification. So when his family arrive, another agency who has helped them with the travel costs for the family to arrive are aware that Bertie is not making any efforts to make any plans for his family arrival. So they refer to us with the family's permission and say, I've identified this family, this father really needs support to access services because his family are going to arrive, they've got nowhere to stay, there's no space in the house, he's not claimed universal credit for himself, he has no money to support the family, and the family will be in a really difficult situation. So when the family arrive, we get in touch with the family and help father to, first of all, to make a homeless application for his family. And he's not aware he can do this or how to do this, so support him to make the homelessness application, help him identify what documents he needs to make this application, and then once housing is secured, help them understand the rights and responsibilities they have to pay their bills, to apply for council tax support, to pay how to claim housing benefit for their rent. Also help the family set up their universal credit claim, apply for child benefit, access food banks when while they're waiting for these claims to be established, and then as they get settled, then it's helping the children enroll in school. This family were very fearful about the children attending school and what that would mean for them. So dealing with their fears about that and just guiding them through that process. Also, supporting them register with the GP. There was a number of ongoing health issues for the children that had not been dealt with for many years, helping them access specialist health care. And then all the time, just identifying who in the family has capacity to grow and just take on more responsibility for the family. Initially, the worker, I was doing everything for them, but coaching a family member, in this case it was mum, to grow in her confidence and her skills and gradually help her to take more responsibility to do these things for herself. So by the end of 9 months, we were able to close the case. The family had been then removed into a private tenancy and were able to access all the services and were starting to be able to function for themselves. Mum was also enrolled on an English course. So this is an example of the support a family we provide to a family. I'm now going to hand over to Chloe. That's a lot of talking. Who's going to talk about the need for cultural sensitivity and how we work this way with families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So building trust with refugee families. So before we look at the subject of building trust, I just wanted to make kind of 2 points. The first point is that each and every family is unique, and at CFAB, we really do tailor our work when we work with the families and meet them where they are, and we keep the space, all the challenges that Ruth has just spoken about, And sometimes when Ruth and I are reflecting on things, I think, gosh, just one of those challenges would really kind of, it would have an adverse effect on our mental health. So we always try to put ourselves in the position of our families with all their challenges, and hold space for those. And I think we see this as working with our families. And the second point is one about history and culture, which I think is really important when we're looking at building trust. So we have, the collective history that people from a certain country will have. There's collective culture, generic culture that people will have. What's really important, I think, when we're looking at building trust is knowing, okay, there is that history of that culture or that country, there is that shared generic culture, but there is also the personal family history and the personal family culture. And I think understanding this and keeping it in mind when we're practicing is essential to building trust with our families. Because it's only then that we can start to begin to co-create a rapport of trust, and that we can then actually effectively work with our families. Ruth speaks Arabic, I speak Farsi. That's already a great help. We recognise kind of how lucky we are in that, actually. We've also lived in places where some of our families come from. But even if we don't speak the same language, I think by showing respectful curiosity, we're showing the family that they matter to us, that they mean something to us, and that we're going to embark on this journey together. Something funny, learning how to say hello in Tigrinya and how are you in Tigrinya, it shows the family that we're making an effort, that they are important to us, that we're respecting them and their culture and their history. And then maybe a younger member of the family will start laughing because we've said it with a rubbish accent, and that kind of starts melting the ice as well. And I think a sense of humour is really important in building trust as well. By knowing something of the family's history and culture, we can make sense of what the family is telling us, and we can understand their responses and behaviours. And I don't mean about just what they're telling us directly, but what they are indirectly telling us as well. Again, as Ruth mentioned, a family who's been on the move a lot may not understand the importance of of children attending school. There may be fear. And part of this building trust is about informing the family about UK law, particularly as it relates to children and families, and ensuring that they know that they have to adhere to this. For example, registering children in school and regular school attendance. Again, some family members may have experienced persecution or mistreatment at the hands of authority figures, and they have a mistrust of government and government agencies. If we know this, if we've taken the time to speak with the family, to listen to what they're telling us, then we can reassure them and over time strengthen the rapport of trust between us, and also explain their fears when we're advocating on the family's behalf to other services such as housing officers or solicitors or social workers or anybody else. And this helps the family to start feeling safe. It also means that the family don't have to keep on explaining themselves or repeating themselves over and over and over again. We recognise as well that building a rapport of trust is a two-way dynamic. And when we visit families, we recognise that we're entering their homes as their guests. We'll take off our shoes, we'll dress appropriately, and we're very aware of the importance of hospitality, time and space in many cultures, and we use this to establish the rapport of trust. So we will take time during a visit to share food if the family offers it to us, to drink coffee or tea together, to receive that hospitality. And this can also help families to feel empowered. They're not just service users, but we're working together and we're establishing trust. And this trust is what is going to bring about that change. And it also means that there's a slight shift in the power dynamic as well. And during these times, when we're with the families receiving hospitality, I mean, obviously, we're not going there rocking up and expecting, a full course meal and those kind of things. So we're not expecting anything. But if the family offers it to us, then we will accept their hospitality. Another thing as well in this building up of trust, I think is important, is storytelling. We know how important it is in life story work. Trauma-informed practice also highlights the importance of storytelling for families. So as we share a meal or a cup of coffee or tea, this gives space and time to listen to the stories and provide time for us as practitioners to use our active listening skills. As we listen to family stories, we're validating and helping them construct and make sense of this experience, of their experiences. And this is a practice that we've lost in our Western task-based culture, but it's part of the everyday life in Middle Eastern culture. This is how knowledge is shared. This is how people make sense of their world. And also, there's an expression in both Arabic and Farsi, and it's often used. The expression is, we have shared bread and salt together. It's often used following a disagreement, and it just shows how important the sharing of food together is. So there's the idea of, gosh, we were so close. We shared bread and salt together. We have this shared history together. And so this gives us permission to go deeper and to address difficult issues that may arise, and helps us to establish trust and authenticity in the working relationship with our families. And that's it. Okay.
Can we interrupt you, Chloe? Are you able to move your mic down a little bit, because it's quite crackly?
Yeah, is that better?
That's much better.
Yeah? No worries. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so the need for cultural sensitivity when we're working with refugee families, again, is linked to trust. In fact, I don't think, trust can exist without cultural sensitivity. So cultural sensitivity can be as basic, in inverted commas, as not imposing an appointment on a family and at an unsuitable time during the fasting month of Ramadan, for example, when they might be sleeping or resting. This shows the family that we're sensitive to their cultural ways and we're validating their religious and cultural practices. But also, as previously discussed, cultural sensitivity is also shown when we give the family time and space to land. We're holding space for the storytelling, for the drinking of tea and coffee, for the sharing of bread and salt. It also means that we're not imposing our ways of doing things and our systems on the family. But cultural sensitivity also means that as practitioners, we don't assume anything about our families. We have a role to inform the families we work with about the law in the UK and how this relates to children and families. This is because that we cannot assume that families will know how the law works here, and we must not set up our families for failure. Families trust us to support them, not just with issues around housing and benefits, but how to live well now that they're here in the UK. Some families, for example, are surprised when they find out that the state is intervening in their methods of child rearing, since in their country of origin, the state does not get involved in domestic matters. And if we don't work with our families to understand how the law relates to them, and then we're afraid of offending families, then we're engaging in kind of cultural relativism and not in cultural sensitivity. And when we engage in cultural relativism, we could, in effect, what we could end up by saying is that one set of practices that are deemed harmful, such as domestic abuse or physical chastisement of children or female genital mutilation or forced marriage, is fine for one set of the population but not fine for another. I'm just going to give you a quick example. In one of my previous roles, I was facilitating a workshop on forced marriage at a school. And then one of the teachers said how he had had one of his students, a 16-year-old girl, had come to him, and she said, "I'm really scared, sir, because my parents are taking me back home for a holiday, and I think, they want me to get married to someone, and I don't want to." And the teacher said to me that he had not known what to do. And he had said that in the end he did nothing because for him it was a cultural matter. The young woman never returned to the UK. And herein lies the danger, because if we label something as a cultural practice, then we may fear to talk about it and even to take action about it for fear of offending someone's culture. And then by the same token, balance is called for, because not all people who adhere to a certain culture will participate in these practices. And by calling them cultural practices, we will be offending those who do not partake in them. Just as a quick example, it may surprise you to learn that domestic abuse only became a criminal act in the UK in 1976 under the Domestic Violence and Matrimonial Proceedings Act. Domestic abuse still goes on in the UK, experienced by people from all backgrounds, socioeconomic groups, and religious affiliations. I'm using this as an example to show that harm and abuse can happen in any culture and in any country. We wouldn't call domestic abuse in the UK a cultural practice. And so female genital mutilation should not be seen as a cultural practice. We must see it as a practice that is harmful. And as practitioners, if we're working with families where they may be coming from a country where FGM is thought to be prevalent, we have a duty to inform families that FGM is illegal in the UK and to inform of the reasons as to why this is the case. There's also a need to understand such practices, not to condone them or to encourage them, but to understand why they are in operation, because without sensitive dialogue, these practices will not be eradicated, and many young women will continue to be harmed and mutilated. So these are difficult conversations to have, but as practitioners, we need to have them, and it is important that we all receive training in practices such as FGM and forced marriage, just as we receive training on child abuse, so that we're able to spot the signs and feel we have the confidence to ensure that families, no matter which country they come from, are kept safe and free from harm. Working with families and encouraging them to understand how life works in the UK and to live well here is all part of respectful curiosity, building rapports of trust and cultural sensitivity. And that's it.
Thank you, Chloe. That's wonderful. Just to say, we've listed here some resources. We've talked about many different things. It's just an overview today, really, of the work we're doing. So please, there's different resources available. We've put in some links of maybe different resources that could give you a bit more information on some of the topics we've talked about. So first of all, please feel free to refer to the post-placement support team, myself or Chloe, for services for families that you're working with. There's more information about our referral criteria there. I've also put some links in about family reunification. What is it? How does that happen? Right to Remain has a great website about all the different rights of refugees and asylum seekers and legal processes. Hostile environment, we mentioned another guide to understanding that a bit more. And then Project 17, they have a great toolkit for people with no recourse to public funds. So asylum seekers, people in that situation. So what are their benefits and entitlements? So just some signposting there for some useful resources. Okay. I think that's us done. So I think we're ready for questions. I think you're on mute, Angela.
Yeah, it's not changing. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that. Sorry, I was just getting those polls up that we would be really grateful if you would be able to complete those. I think we are actually kind of over time now. So we have had a couple of questions from Clara, Chloe and Carol. And what we'll do is we'll make a note of those questions and send those out. We'll answer them, and when we send out some post-event communications, we'll just list those questions in there and get those answers out to everyone, because I'm conscious that most of you are probably on your lunch breaks and want to go and run and grab a cup of coffee or something before you're back to work. And I think someone's just asked if we'll share the slides, but yeah, absolutely. And obviously that will have all of the links that that Ruth's popped in that one for you as well, that you'll be able to view and take a look at. So once again, thank you all very much for coming and sharing your lunch break with us, and keep an eye out for future Lunch and Learns, which we'll send out communications when we have them. Thank you very much.